Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you might be watching this. Today's video, I'm going to be going over or giving you a bit of a walkthrough in terms of what I did to lose 14 kilos in 7 weeks ahead of me going away on holiday to Malta. So, wrapped up that diet significantly quicker than I expected, and what I thought would be good is to basically give you a detailed walkthrough in terms of what I did from the get-go with my training, my nutrition, my activity, etc. In order to, on average, lose about 2 kilos every single week. Now, with this video, I do want to make it fundamentally clear as well that this approach isn't going to be for everyone. If you are someone who is looking to lose a significant amount of body fat and weight ahead of something like a holiday, a wedding, an event, whatever the fuck, and you are willing to put a little bit more time and effort into it, and you're not too arsed about balance or sustainability or flexibility or anything like that, then this is definitely an approach that you can take. If you are someone who is looking to maybe build better habits, a more positive, healthy lifestyle, and you're kind of starting from the ground up, this approach I personally don't think is going to be for you, okay? You could definitely learn a thing or two through this video. Even if it's just when I start talking about the nutrition side of things, what you could start doing with your diet initially now to get your fat loss journey started. But yeah, if you've got if you're someone who's morbidly overweight or obese and you've got a significant amount of weight to be losing, and you're looking to just create a bit of a healthier lifestyle, and as I said, start from the ground up, I don't think this approach is going to be the best for you. Okay, now the initial. I was basically coming from a place, if you look at the before photo, I was coming from a place where I had gained a significant amount of body fat just from prioritizing other things for the past, in 2024 and into the start of 2025, work pretty much took over to the point where I was still training and I was still eating about 90% clean food all of the time. But it was very much a case of me eating my meals, but then enjoying like a cookie here or there in between. And it just got to a point where my business was my sole priority last year and into the start of this year. And I've got zero regrets about that because I'm in a place where I didn't think I could take my coaching to. But as a result, my physique slipped a little bit, and I gained a good chunk more body fat than I would want to gain in an improvement phase, a bulk, whatever you'd like to call it. So when me and Kimberly booked our Malta holiday, I basically looked myself in the mirror and I was like, right, I need to fucking shift some body fat here. So there was two ultimate goals with this diet, and it was to put myself in a productive starting point for then building muscle when we get back from Malta, but then also just feel more confident and comfortable within my own skin being away on holiday. It's not a holiday where I think we're going to necessarily, I'm not going to be cutting about with my top off all the time. I'm just not generally that kind of person. I am actually a little bit more body confident when I'm holding a bit more fluff and I'm not shaving or anything like that. But the thing for me is just like not walking about feeling bloated or lethargic or sluggish. And it's hot as fuck over there, and I don't just want to be sweating consistently all the time. So it was about just more so feeling confident and comfortable away on holiday, and then put myself in a productive starting point for when we get back. So when I started the diet, I was about 115 kilos, sorry. And a lot of that was obviously body fat. And I didn't have any idea on how much body fat I wanted to lose or how much weight I wanted to lose. I was just like, right, once I get to a point where I'm significantly leaner, I'm holding visible labs, there's muscle definition in certain areas, more specifically like my hamstrings, my midsection, and my lower back, because those areas are typically the areas that are like last to come in for me. So as soon as I've got like visible abs, I've got lower back definition showing through, and my hamstrings are looking a little bit stripped out, I know I'm probably at a point where it's like, right, I'm lean enough there. But if I wanted to take it that step further, I will. It was never about getting like photo shoot ready or getting like peeled or anything like that. It was just about getting a great deal of a productive amount of body fat off without having to sacrifice training performance or quality of life. I've done those levels of diets before, and I will do them again at some point in time, but there's there's a bit of a trade-off with when you're trying to get that lean, and other areas of your life definitely have to take a hit, whether it's relationships, whether it's productivity, whether it's sleep, whether it's training. And for me, just getting in shape for a holiday isn't worth those trade-offs. So initially I was like, I don't know how much body fat I need to get off, but I know where I look like at around 100 kilos, so that I'll aim for that. I finished the diet, I think it was just a little bit below 100 kilos. So I was pretty on the ball there. Now, the initial change that I made was, first off, just cutting out the crap. As I said before, my diet was pretty consistent with getting my meals in, but I was also having maybe 1 or 2 off-plan meals per week. I was having maybe a cookie or 2 here or there in between meals. So the junk food, the snacking and the off-plan meals, I took them and I got them to fuck. The next step that I took was just adding in some level of cardio. Working online and working from my laptop, I'm sat on my fat arse in this position most of the time. My cardiovascular exercise wasn't the best. So just adding in some level of cardio, which I'll be going through as well, and how I built that up. I just added that in, and that already increased my level of expenditure and that deficit, obviously. The next step that I took was just adding in a consistent step count. On average, I think I was getting about 6,000 steps just from obviously being in this position most of the time. So what I did was essentially said to myself, I'm going to aim to double that. And that's obviously a lot more, but in my mind, it was right, if I go for a walk first thing in the morning, a walk in the evening, and a 10-minute walk after every single meal, I'll be hitting that target no bother, and it wasn't an issue. So those were the initial changes that I made. Now, with the diet itself, what I did with my calories, on average, I was eating about 4,500 calories. And I said to myself, right, I'm going to be taking an aggressive approach here, so I'm going to take a good chunk of that away initially. Now, from the calories that I was actually tracking and I was having from my meals, that went from 4,500 down to 3,500. So that's a 1,000 calorie subtraction right there off the bat, which is a shit heap. But again, I was pushing quite aggressively. Now, that's not taking into account all the bits and bobs that I was having in between. So that deficit was going to be more than, the level of calories I took away was going to be more than 1,000 just from me removing the snacks, any kind of bits and bobs in between, even off-plan eating. So it probably, I would say on average, my calories typically probably would have been somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000. That's a pretty vague estimate there. There's obviously a 500 calorie difference, but taking that number down to 3,500, adding in a higher step count, adding in a bit of cardio, I knew off the bat that I was going to shift weight initially. What I was aiming for with protein was just 2 grams per kilo of body weight. So at the time, I was 115 kilos. I was just aiming for 230 grams of complete protein. Now, when I say complete protein, I'm talking about getting protein that is a complete profile that comes from actual protein sources. So, for an example, if you're getting in if you're someone who eats porridge oats, they have a relatively high count of trace protein. Any kind of food source that is bringing a level of protein that isn't classed as a protein source is what is classed as trace, meaning that it's not complete, and it doesn't come with a complete profile of the amino acids, which is essentially what protein actually is. So I was aiming for about 230, but then when you count in all the trace amounts of protein, which does play some role when it's in the presence of complete protein, and I'm not going to get too much into this because we'll be here all fucking day, you were probably pushing closer to somewhere between 275 to 300 grams, which is obviously quite a significant number. But I was aiming for, off the bat, 230 grams of complete protein. In terms of fats, I'm a big believer in having a baseline level of unsaturated, quote unquote, healthy fats. So I was just aiming for 40 grams. Basically 4 of my 5 meals per day, I was getting 10 grams of healthy fats in, and that was ticking that box. Mainly to just help with metabolic function, hormone regulation, and I also I enjoy my meals having some level of fats in it. So every meal apart from my post-workout meal had 10 grams of added unsaturated fats in. And the only thing that I manipulated or really changed was my carbohydrate intake. Okay, I brought my protein intake a little bit down when my body weight started coming down quite rapidly. I brought my protein intake down just a little bit, but not too much. It went from that 230 down to, I think it was like 215, something like that. So a 15 gram difference, which is not massive. But the one thing that I manipulated was carbohydrates, because it's, in my opinion, out of the three macros, it's the one that's not essential. Protein is 100% without a doubt essential. Unsaturated fats, there's an argument to be made that it's not essential, but you're going to have a shit time if you're not getting in an adequate amount. Carbohydrates, you can live on a zero carb diet. You might feel like a bag of dicks, but you can survive and you can still train and you can still perform. So that was the one thing that I manipulated, and it got to a point where, on my training days, I would have at the beginning anyway, I had one meal that was zero carb, and it was at the very end of the day. And on a rest day, my first and last meal had zero carbs, and it eventually got to the point at the end of the diet where I finished on 2,600 calories on a training day and 2,000 calories on a rest day. And the only carbs in my meal were pre and post training on a training day. And then on a rest day, it was still, I think it was my fourth meal. Okay, so the first three, and then the final meal on the rest day had zero carb, and it was just the fourth one that had carbs in it. But then I was always just prioritizing my carbohydrate intake pre and post training, okay, because carbohydrates, main energy currency of the human body, you want them to be prioritizing that training. Now, with the training itself, I was following a push-pull legs, upper body, lower body split. Now, if you're someone that has a high level of body fat, you are a beginner with your strength training, or you're getting back into it after an extended period of time off, or you're someone who is enhanced or whatever, you can build muscle in a fat loss phase. However, if you're someone who is aggressively dieting, has a good level of foundation of muscle already built, and a significant level of experience, let's just say, in the gym training, pretty much all those boxes describing myself, you're not going to be building muscle in a fat loss phase. Okay, so with myself, I knew that my training, with the way that I was setting up my diet and it being quite aggressive, my training needed to be set up in a way where it was just prioritizing muscle retention and maintaining strength. Rather than looking at it as I could be building muscle, I need to need to view my training as an opportunity to maintain the muscle that I've already built. So what I did was I reduced my training volume. So for heavy hitting compound movements that maybe had like 3 sets, I would strip that down to 2. Any kind of intensifiers that I had throughout my program, I removed them. So things like drop sets, supersets, cluster sets, anything like that, I basically removed them because they weren't necessary. Any kind of compound movements that would take away from recovery and potentially, so let's just say I had a leg press that was 3 sets at the start of a session. That third set it's not essential, it's not necessary in order to maintain. I know that those 2 sets are going to do the job, and that third set could still enhance that. It could still help retain a little bit more muscle, I guess, but it's also going to take away from the rest of the session. So I know if I've just got a handful of compound movements where I'm doing 2 heavy sets, and then maybe some isolation movements around that where I'm doing 2 or 3 sets, that's going to get the job done. At the beginning, I'm still prioritizing progressing and getting stronger and beating last week's numbers, but I know it will get to a point where it's like, right, this is just a case of maintaining, okay, as the food gets lower and expenditure gets higher. So I was prioritizing just maintaining my strength, retaining as much muscle as I possibly could. I removed all intensifiers, and I slightly reduced my training volume just to prioritize that strength. Now with cardio, as I said, I wasn't doing anything before. So initially I just started with 5 minutes on the Stairmaster, 20 minutes, 5 times a week on the Stairmaster every day apart from my leg days. Okay, so I had 2 leg days in a week. I'm just doing on the 5 other days. That eventually built up to a point where I was then doing 30 minutes every single day. And then that eventually got to a point where I was doing 30 minutes on training days and 50 minutes on rest days. Now, this was at a point where I found that I was making that trade-off between losing a shit heap of body fat, but also seeing everything else declining, okay? I was seeing my productivity and working performance decline. I was seeing my training performance start to decline. I was finding that I was bickering with Kimberly more because I was just a moody, grumpy cunt. Everything that was more essential and more important to me than seeing those bigger scale weight drops was starting to decline. So I think I did the 30-50 cardio split for about a week and a half before I was like, right, I need to pull back a little bit here. So I basically stripped that back for the 30 minutes daily. And I just stayed consistent with that for the rest of the time. And that was still enough. Now, this is what I was speaking about at the beginning of the video. If you are someone who is like just looking to lose weight, let's just say long-term or sustainably in a healthy way, you're aiming for about 0.5 to 1% scale weight drops every single week. Okay, that's a healthy amount of weight. It means that you're not sacrificing lean mass, skeletal tissue, muscle tissue, whatever. And you're obviously going to be losing glycogen, water weight, things like that, but you're also losing a decent bit of body fat too. If aiming for that 0.5 to 1% drop is a healthy approach, and you wouldn't really be changing anything as long as you're falling within that range. If you're losing that consistently week to week, you don't need to adjust your food, you don't need to adjust your cardio, your daily movement or anything, just stick to the plan, okay? With myself, I was on average losing 2 kilos a week, which is over 1%. I mean, it's 2% actually, just about. And I was still making changes every couple of weeks. Okay, so whether that was a food drop or it was a cardio increase, I was making these changes in fact, there was a point where I was doing it every single week just to push aggressively. I knew that I had a short time frame, and I was thinking in my head, I would rather do it in a short space of time and push aggressively than spread it out. So originally I was saying to myself it was going to be a 12-week diet, and I kind of achieved everything I wanted to achieve in 7 weeks, okay? And that's because of how aggressively I pushed things. So initially at the start of that diet, I slashed my calories significantly. The initial difference was I removed all junk, I removed the snacking, I removed the unnecessary shite in my nutrition. I removed any kind of flexibility, any kind of balance. It was my 5 meals on my meal plan, nothing else. And then gradually over the time, that 3,500 calories on a training day and 3,000 on a rest day become 2,600 on a training day and 2,000 on a rest day. And the way that I would decrease my calories was by just like 10%, just when I felt that change was actually needed. Cardio went from 20 minutes 5 times per week to 25 minutes 5 times per week, which then eventually went to half an hour 5 times per week, which then eventually went to half an hour 7 times a week. That obviously went to then 50 minutes on a rest day, and that was the biggest jump, where I was obviously doing it in small increments, but then I made a big jump going from 30 minutes daily to 30 minutes 5 times a week, and then 50 minutes twice a week, which is quite a big jump there. And I lost over 2 kilos in that about a week and a half that I was doing that, but it wasn't worth the trade-off, so that's when I pulled it back. And then when I pulled it back, I only think I had about maybe another 2 weeks of doing just cardio daily, and I still lost, it was like 3 and a bit kilos in that time frame. I'm not actually too sure exactly how much weight I was losing week to week, but on average it was about 2 kilos every single week, which is obviously still a significant amount. So the way that I was pushing things was I was trying to stay ahead of the curve. Okay, I was almost anticipating, right, I know I don't need to make a change to still lose 1% of my scale weight next week, but I still want to lose a little bit more than that. I want to stay ahead of the curve, and I'm trying to anticipate a plateau in my progression. So I was just making those changes almost, I wouldn't say unnecessarily, just ahead of time. Just again, preempting that kind of plateau in my progress, and rather than just not necessarily wasting a week of progress, but just trying to enhance it, increase it a little bit. Okay. But that is pretty much what I did. Now, kind of having a look at where I started, I've said to myself that I'm not going to let myself get that fat again. as I said, last year, or the past year for myself, was very much a year, of prioritizing other things, which I'm totally fine with. But going forward, I feel like I found a good balance. I don't like that word, but a good balance now of work's in a very good spot. I found like a new schedule and routine that's going to allow me to prioritize myself at the same time. And I'm basically going to be less of a fat, gluttonous cunt over the next year, while prioritizing my physique in order to build muscle, but also maintain a good level of composition as well at the same time. But having a look at the differences in my physique, there are the areas that I wanted to see definition, I'm now seeing. My lower back is significantly leaner, my hamstrings are significantly leaner, my midsection has definitely come in a hell of a lot more. The areas that I've wanted to see more definition and a level of like leanness, is that a word? I'm making it a word. I'm now seeing them, so I'm happy with where I'm at, and I'm in a good spot now where it's like, right, I'm just trying to maintain it, slowly build. I've got another 3 weeks before going away on holiday. I'm just trying to maintain it and slowly build the food up. Training performance has already skyrocketed again, just with the food going up and the expenditure coming down. So my calories have went from 2,600 on a training day and 2,000 on a rest day to 3,250 on a training day and 2,900 on a rest day. Cardio's went from 30 minutes daily to 30 minutes 4 times per week. So I'm just doing that on my 2 rest days and on my push and upper body day. So taking my pull and my 2 leg days completely off there. Step counts went from 12K down to 10K. I'll probably keep that consistent. Might drop it down to 9 at some point, depending, but it's everything that I'm doing now, I think, is very manageable. It's just more so about keeping my nutrition in check while I build the calories up and making sure that I don't... The only reason why I got as fat as I did was because I became less active and I was just letting nutrition slip a little bit. I was still eating my meals and I was still having whole good food 90% of the time, but I was having the added shit added in, funnily enough. So I'm just going to be removing that all the time. My hunger is still sky high, my appetite is still sky high. And it's just a case now of keeping that for as long as I possibly can while the food builds up. Because when I first started the diet, I wasn't hungry whatsoever, just because of where my food was at and how much shit I was eating in between it. So it was completely unnecessary. So it's about keeping that hunger and appetite in a very good spot as I slowly build that food up over time. And I'm not someone, I struggle to lose weight. I know it sounds a little bit like nonsensical because of how much weight I've lost over the past 7 weeks, but I struggle to lose weight and I do have to push things quite aggressively and quite hard. Whereas gaining weight, I don't struggle with whatsoever. With my calories being over 3,000, I don't think I'll probably have to go over 4,000 for quite some time. And I love my food, I enjoy eating, but I need to change my mindset from, wanting to eat more food to just being like, right, if I can gain weight and build muscle while keeping things tidy and not having to force feed or shovel food down like a big fat bastard, that's a good thing, that's a positive thing. So keep that for as long as I possibly can. But yeah, that's been a bit of a walkthrough as to what I've done to shed 14 kilos over the past 7 weeks ahead of my holiday. It's been a bit longer than expected, so hopefully you've learned something. Again, if you're looking to lose weight sustainably, let's just say, or in a healthy way, I wouldn't recommend this. If you're looking for a method where you kind of want to throw the kitchen sink at it or lose a heap of body fat in a very short space of time for something, whether it's a holiday, an event, whatever the fuck it might be, an approach that you can take from the get-go, you need to remove all levels of balance and flexibility and cut out the crap. So I would say off-plan eating, snacking, you create a diet that has got 2 grams of complete protein per kilo of current body weight, and at least 40 grams of unsaturated fats, manipulated carbohydrates, prioritizing them pre and post workout, and that's your diet. Okay, nothing else for the foreseeable until you come back from whatever the fuck your event might be. Cardio, you can push that as aggressively as you can without it taking away from training performance. A good place to start is half an hour, 5 times per week, I think. You'll feel good from that, and it's not enough to fuck you over. I personally just use the Stairmaster and get my heart rate between 130 and 150. I enjoy intense cardio. I like to sweat, I like being out of breath, and I like feeling a little bit knackered afterwards. It just sets me for the day and it feels productive. So I usually push my heart rate up to 150 beats per minute, which for me is like 66 steps on a Stairmaster per minute. And that's just enough for me personally. Steps, you fucking get as many as you can, essentially. You're not going to hinder recovery or anything like that just doing a boatload of steps. So if you're doing 15,000 on average every single day, you'll be fine from that. If you're doing below 10k, I would definitely try and get that number up, because steps are, in my opinion, very underrated. It's something that you can compound over time. And again, if you're getting, let's just say you've got someone who's doing 10,000 steps per day and someone who's doing 15,000 steps per day, that is then a difference of, 35,000 steps across the week. You do that over a period of 8 weeks. I'm not fucking Rain Man, so I can't do that mathematically. All I know is a shit heap. So it's one of these things where it might not feel like it does a massive difference on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis, but if you're doing it every single day, every single week for, 2 to 3 months, that compounds over time. So get that up as much as you possibly can. But yeah, I would say removal, sustainability, flexibility, and balance. Let's just say with your diet, prioritize protein and healthy fats. Manipulate your carbohydrates, prioritize them around your pre and post-workout meals. Train anywhere between 3 and 5 times per week. Prioritize getting, even if you, with your training, you should always be prioritizing getting as strong as possible, but don't just do a bunch of junk volume. Just think in your head, right, I'm going in here to get strong as fuck, and then nothing else matters. I'm not just doing it to get a pump or anything like that. And then just do it consistently and you'll lose a shit heap of body fat, okay? I've obviously used myself as a bit of an example here, but if you have questions or if you would like a little bit of help getting off a significant amount of body fat in a short space of time for whatever the fuck you have got going on, you can either drop a comment below, send me a message on Instagram. I'll leave the link to my Instagram in the description of this video, and I'll catch you in the next video.